Hey folks, Ashley, allthingsdentistry.com. We're just taking a series of videos just about forced eruption orthodontic extrusion. I think it's a fairly effective technique, but there's not a lot of, it's sort of voodoo. And unless you've done one or worked with somebody who can teach you, the pictures of start to finish seem to be very simple. And it is fairly simple, but there's just a few things you got to think about pre-planning that are fairly important to success. That's essentially like everything. Anyways, I have a PDF up. You can go over the indications and some of the more technical details. Let's just go right into it. So in this situation, fairly straightforward. We've got a fractured mandibular premolar at the gingiva, and for whatever reason, we've elected to orthodontically extrude it. Now in this case, if we don't have fixed orthodontic appliances, such as this other case we're going to talk about, we could use essentially a paperclip and some composite and some sort of elastomeric material, be it power chain or the stuff called power thread or active thread. And quite frankly, when I feel this feels like if you have young kids with toys that are boxed in boxes, or you have cousins and other kids. I mean, it really feels like that material. I'll let you think about that, food for thought. In any event, so what we've done here is I placed we have our tooth, which is either endodontically treated or you're going to endodontically retreat it. Sort of the endodontic plan. I took just some paper clip and made a bend. It doesn't flip off. There we go. Made a bend. I don't need you can make a hook, but the real problem is that if you make a really fancy-dancy hook that comes all the way down like this, is how much clearance do you have? But you need to keep your little hook as apically as possible, with being able to get your power chain onto here and not bind out, not stop your extrusion really quick. Now hopefully I explained that well enough, and I'll show you when we place on our power chain. So what kind of cement would you cement this down with? The world is your oyster. A material that that is going to retain your post through the orthodontic extrusion process. Now we're looking at Profit says 50 to 100 grams of force for orthodontic extrusion. What does that mean? I'm not sure. I don't think it's difficult to quantify that intraorally. So we need a material that is going to retain your post, but at the same time you need to be able to remove it. So, and around the world, which these videos are starting to be seen, everyone has their own material. So if you have a material that you've been using, please put it in the comments. That would be fairly helpful. Additionally, one of the things that I ran into was make sure that if you are using a cement and your tooth is not endodontically treated, or you're in the process of retreating, make sure you have something that will prevent your cement from going to the apex, like a little piece of cotton pellet or something material like that. Okay, so now we place our post. We have it such that it's as far apically as possible. The top of the bend as far apically as possible, but I can still manage intraorally trying to get that elastic material in there. So the next piece is sort of this beam that comes across. Placed it in just with composite, really simple. One of the things you need to think about is that in ortho, the saying is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as we're trying to extrude this tooth, the opposing forces will try to intrude the adjacent teeth. Now, it may not be such an issue with a molar, but perhaps the premolar. So you may want to increase your anchorage or root surface area by bonding these two teeth together, or these two teeth together, or placing fixed brackets. I mean, it really becomes a creative sort of, you need to determine on your own, because additionally the periodontal support around these teeth will determine your course of action. And then once you place your wire, your occlusion. So if the patient's going to be occluding on that composite, it may actually fracture the composite earlier than you'd like, we're looking for trying to retain this approximately 6 months in the position that it's at. So you really need to factor that in to your timings. And we're looking at approximately 1 millimeter per month, 1 millimeter per 3 weeks of extrusion, and then retaining that in the place for 6 months. But every situation is different. Every type of bone is different. If you have some perio disease, that may influence the speed at which your orthodontic extrusion will occur. So less on that. The other thing is, so if you have, you notice we don't have very much room between the top of the hook here and the bar. So if this was edentulous on the maxilla, perhaps you could bend the bar a bit coronally to obtain a little more offset, increase the distance to which you can extrude. So it really becomes sort of a rigging, what I like to do, just rig things. So we placed our post, we've placed our bar, now let's place our elastomeric material. I'll show you power chain. I'm sure there are millions of different types of materials. Rubber dam, if you don't have any of this, that might work. I'm not sure. You know, you really have to rig what you have. So in this case, like I said, you gotta be able to make sure that you can get, make sure that you can actually get your perfect timing. I'm almost done. You gotta make sure you're able to get your power chain onto your hook and then over the bar. So an intraorally can be a challenge too. So this is a case that we were talking about in the car, and then place this over like this. One thing I didn't mention, and there you go. So one thing I didn't mention just before you start throwing your 5 cents, which I'd like you to do, open coil spring, and this would go just between the teeth passively, and this would prevent the movement of this power chain. Now, why is that important? Well, it may induce some sort of directional change. Instead of being extruding the tooth vertically, it may induce an angulation, which may lead down to root proximity issues. All right, go.
When you're doing the extrusion,
yep,
you have two holes of power chain that come up over. Eventually, your distance between your hook and your supporting wire is going to lessen as it extrudes. So this could be cut down to one then, and essentially you just have one chain that you're going to stretch up over as it comes over, because the distance is going to be too short for two to even work. So eventually you could just come down to one chain, and as that comes up enough that you can perhaps even bond something on the buckle here, along with here, and then you could go with a wire and take this off, and then progressively put a step up in the wire to keep that going up higher. If you need more ferrule for your prep.
Now the elastomeric material, you're the expert on this. We were talking about the force degrades after 24 hours.
First hour, any rubber that you put in your mouth, orthodontics, whether it's power chain, power thread, O-ties, first hour degradation force is 50% less. And as time goes on, that comes down to close to nothing. And that's why power chain works so well, because in orthodontics what you want is a slow continuous force on teeth for optimal tooth movement. So when you put power chain on teeth, you know, like you said, first hour, 50% degradation, and it wears down close to nothing after that, to that optimal force that you need for tooth movement. Granted, you know, the heavier the force you put on the tooth, you're gonna, you know, you can move it, but that's not the type of movement that you want with teeth, because you're gonna have your undermine resorption, which means you know, higher rate of root resorption, and the undermining resorption is gonna have with the blockage of your vasculature around the teeth, and you're not gonna have your osteoclasts and your osteoblasts come to the area, and you're gonna get a necrosis of bone in the area of tooth movement, and that you don't want.
Okay, so then one of the other elastic materials that we have, floating around the residency is this active line or power thread. Now with this, you can actually make your hook a little more distinct. And essentially we're just going to tie a knot. So you can see I'm going to pull it and then knot it. Try your best to tie a square knot if you can. May increase the length of time this knot stays. And then just to check to see if it's tight enough, we'll just tug on it a bit, and the knot doesn't move much, so there you go. So that's just another material you can use in your attempts to orthodontically extrude this tooth. So the next series that we're going to do is talk about extruding an anterior tooth. In this case I've developed just put together a simple bisicular crown and post. And we're going to try to attempt the same thing on here. I'm going to refabricate this post. Cheers.